Okay, so let's finish what we had started, and by that I mean let's complete our discussion on the one question on activity-based costing that was left. What is the requirement? Always make sure that you read the requirement first. Calculate the production cost per unit of plus and double plus if the company uses traditional absorption costing and the overheads are recovered on a direct labor hours basis. Calculate the production cost per unit of plus and double plus if the company uses activity based costing. Comment on the reasons for differences in the production cost per unit between the two methods and what are the implications of using an activity based costing system instead of an absorption costing system. See, this question in a way is not framed with 100% accuracy. What does the question say? The question says that what is the difference between activity based costing and absorption costing? Not realizing the fact that activity based costing is a way is or is a method of absorption costing only. The question should have been what is the difference between activity based costing and your traditional method of absorption costing. That should have been the question, but okay, no problem there. They have asked us to calculate the cost per unit using the traditional absorption costing system, and then they have asked us to calculate the same using activity based costing. Now, if you remember, in case of activity based costing, you will have to first of all understand what are the cost drivers. What do I mean by cost drivers? Cost drivers are those items which influence that particular activity or which influence the cost. For example, if you were to calculate the if you wanted to calculate the overall distribution of rent cost over a number of units, then you would take the per square foot area as the starting point for that. So whenever you are thinking about activity based costing, you will have to first of all identify the overhead absorption rate. You will have to but for that you will have to first of all get to the calculation or identification of the cost drivers, and once the cost drivers have been identified, then of course the calculation will make more sense. So let's start our analysis of this question. Okay, now again, as I said, reading the requirement first gives you an idea ki what exactly are we supposed to do and what direction are we supposed to go in. Now that it has been established, let's go let's go a little deeper into this calculation. Calculate the production cost if the company uses traditional absorption costing and the overheads are recovered on a direct labor hour basis. So they are going to consider labor hours as the base. Kabal makes and sells two products, plus and double plus. The direct cost of production are 12 for one unit of plus and 24 per one unit of double plus. This is direct cost of production. Information relating to annual production and sales is as follows. For plus and double plus, the numbers have been given to you. Annual production, labor hours per unit, number of orders, blah, blah, blah. And the first thing is calculation of overhead cost has to be done using the traditional absorption costing. So, calculation of production cost using traditional absorption costing. For this, we are using labor hours as the base. Okay, so what is the total number of labor hours? Units produced into labor hours per unit. Okay, total labor hours will be units produced into labor hours per unit. So 24,000 into 1, 24,000 into 1.5. 24,000 into 1 plus 24,000 into 1.5. How? 1.5. What is my total number of labor hours? The total number of labor hours is 60,000. And what was there in the numerator? The numerator is basically the total budgeted overheads, which is 4,32,000. So how will we calculate the overhead absorption rate? The overhead absorption rate will be total budgeted overheads upon total budgeted hours, which is 4,32,000 upon 60,000. And when you try to calculate this, you do get your answer, which is 4,32,000 upon 60,000. That is 7.2. Make it a habit to write down what is 7.2. In the sense, you will have to write down 7.2 per labor hour. But have they asked you to calculate only the overhead cost? No, they have asked you to calculate the total production cost per unit. They have given you the direct cost of production 12 and 24. To that, you will have to add the overhead cost and you will arrive at the total production cost. Particulars plus and double plus. So I will write down direct production cost. How much is it? Direct production cost 12 and 24. Let this be A, let this be C and T. I will need labor hours per unit. 1, 1.5. And what is the overhead absorption rate? Overhead absorption rate is 7.2. So what will be the what will be the overhead cost per unit? It will have to be rho B, that is labor hours per unit, into overhead absorption rate. ठीक है. After this, you will get total production cost. How do you get total production cost? It is it is A, direct production cost, plus D, overhead cost per unit. And your answer should be 12 plus 7.2 and 12 plus 10.8, 24 plus 10.8. So this is how you will use the traditional absorption costing system to arrive at the total production cost per unit. Just have a look at it once. Relatively straightforward, this question. Now, this is where the more interesting part starts, where we have to calculate the production cost per unit using ABC. So, calculation of production cost using activity-based costing. See, they have given us the cost drivers. Okay, in this question, luckily we don't have to calculate the cost. We don't have to, uh, first of all, see the cost drivers are given. So we don't have to identify the cost drivers. We can straight away move to the calculation bit. Setup cost is given to you. Number of setups are given to you, special parts handling, other material handling, order handling, and other overheads. For other overheads, we'll still have to use the total number of direct labor hours. But for everything else, the overhead absorb. So cost driver has already been identified for you. So what I'm going to do here, this is cost pool. This is my cost driver. This is my total cost. It now this will be my value of cost driver calculation and then OAR. Calculation calculation I would want to show for how is the cost driver arrived at. Okay, so let's see how we work that out. The costs are also given, so just write them down. For other overheads, nothing has been mentioned, and because nothing has been mentioned, we'll have to go ahead with the total number of labor hours. So this is number of labor hours. What is the value of cost driver? Okay, for setup cost, the cost driver is number of setups. They have given you number of batches, number of setups per batch. So 12 into 1. How do you calculate the number of setups? For one batch, you have to make one setup. So for 12 batches, you will have to make 12 into 1, that is 12. And in case of double plus, for one batch, you have to make three setups. So for 240 batches, it will be 240 into 3. So number of setups will be 12 into 1 plus 240 into 3, 732. Okay, then let's look at special parts handling. The cost driver is number of special parts. Special parts per unit 1, special parts per unit 4. I am making 24,000 units. I will need one special part per unit. I am making 24,000 units. I will need four special parts per unit. So, going to write down 24,000 into 1 plus 24,000 into 3, 96,000. Okay. Three parts है कि sorry, four parts, my mistake. 24,000 into 4, this should be 1,20,000. Then other material handling is number of batches. What is the number of batches here? The number of batches for plus is 12, for double plus it is 240. 12 plus 240, 252. Okay, then order handling is number of orders, 10 here, 140 here. 10 plus 140 makes it 150. And the last one, what is the last one? Number of labor hours that you have already calculated as 60,000. So I'll just write it here, 24,000 into 1 plus 24,000 into 1.5. This makes it 60,000. Now my overhead absorption rate is basically total cost upon the cost driver. 73,200 divided by 732. And now just writing this is not enough. You should write down what is 100. This is 100 per setup. This is 0.50 per special part. This is 250 per batch. This is 132 per order. This is 3.60 per labor hour. So this is my basic calculation of the overhead absorption rate for all the different costs in the overall cost structure. Okay, now this is not the end of the question. Don't get exhausted just yet. This is not the end. We still have to calculate the cost per unit. So we'll have to take the same approach. We'll have to make a table and we'll have to start working from there. Okay, let's start with the whole discussion on individual cost. सबसे पहले let's take a setup cost. Okay, so let's write down number of batches, number of setups per batch, number of batches. C, number of setups per batch. So 12, 240, 1 and 3. 12 batches, 240 batches, 1 and 3. So D, what is the total number of setups? It is B into C. This is 12 into 1. This is 240 into 3. And E is my overhead absorption rate. And here, what was my overhead absorption rate? It was cost per setup. Okay, cost per setup. The cost was 100 per setup. So F will be total setup cost. This is D into E. Okay, what is G? So next item should be the special parts cost. Okay, so number of special parts. उसके लिए first of all let us write down number of units, then number of special parts per unit. 1 and 4 units इतना है 24,000. 24,000. So next point will be total number of special parts. G into H. Okay. So what will this be? This will be 24,000 into 1 and that will be 24,000 into 4. 24,000 into 1 and 24,000 into 4. That is how your calculations will look like. HIJ. What is this? Now you will have your overhead absorption rate, cost per special part. Okay, cost per special part is 0.5. This we have taken from the working. Total cost of special parts. How do you get this? This is I into J. Okay, have a look at it. Have a look at how we have gone about the whole calculations. What are the costs we are interested in? We are interested in this. We are interested in this. We are interested in this also. Okay, so we have covered two out of the five overheads. Let's talk about the next one. What do you have next? You have other material handling, for which you will need number of batches. What is the correct number of batches? 12 and 240. OAR, overhead absorption rate, that is cost per batch. How much is this? 250, 250. N, total other material cost, total other material handling cost will be L, number of batches, into M. Okay, so 12 into 250, 60,000. OPQ. What's the next one? Other handling, for which you need a number of orders. Number of orders. कितना है? 10 and 140. What is the cost per order? Overhead absorption rate 132. OAR 132. So total order handling cost. Total order handling cost is O into P. ठीक है? So now what we have been able to achieve is we have been able to get the overhead absorption rates and the cost for each of the items. Just one item is left, which is other overheads. That also let's complete, and we can then move on to the calculation of total cost. Okay. OPQR, other overheads, and let's write down number of labor hours. 24,000, 36,000. So OAR, that is cost per labor hour. Okay, how much is that? 3.6 per labor hour. 3.6 per labor hour. Then in your total other overheads R into S. 24,000 into 3.6, 36,000 into 3.6. Okay, so we have done, we have now done it for all the items. Now is the time to take the total. Acha, please be careful about which items are you adding up, okay? Very important to know which items have to be added up. U. What is U? Total overheads. Which all items are we adding up? We are adding F, that is total setup cost. Plus we are adding K, which is cost of special parts. Then we are adding N, which is material handling. Then we are adding up Q, and we are adding up T. Okay, now we have our total overheads. Can we get overhead cost per unit? Yes, we can get our overhead cost per unit, which is U divided by total number of units, which is given in row number G. U divided by G. 4.33 and 13.67. ठीक है. But we don't need overhead cost per unit. We need the total cost. So total cost will be U, that is overheads, plus which it will be U plus A, that is direct production cost. So 4.33 plus 12. This is your answer. 16.33 and 37.67. Just have a look at how we navigated the whole problem, and something like this can will be tested in section B questions in your paper. See, it took me around 20 minutes to properly write it because I have gone in excruciating detail of how the question has to be solved. But in exam, of course, you will be doing this in fast track mode. You don't have to show this working because naturally your paper is a 60% of your paper has multiple choice questions, and this this particular part you have to do it very rapidly, you have to do it very quickly, you cannot be wasting time here. So this is what the approach should be, but I have done it in painful detail, I would say, so that you understand how the mechanics of this operate. Okay, so this is how a typical full length question on activity based costing will look like.